All right, we are here in Vancouver with another meeting of the LaRouche movement and the Committee for the Republic of Canada. And our next meeting will be in 2 weeks, which will be October 27th. And you can email me at Paul, P-A-U-L, Glumaz, G-L-U-M-A-Z, @gmail.com if you want to get the address. All right, now here's the situation. We are at an incredible conjuncture of the strategic situation, the economic situation, and the internal political situation in the U.S. These situations are bringing the world ever more closer to a defining moment of nuclear war that obliterates mankind, or a global shift towards a different pathway where the ruling oligarchy over the planet is crushed and a concert of nations begin their process of creating a course of economic development and cooperation for the world. So in other words, we're at the point, coming to this conjuncture, where we're either going to have a nuclear war and humanity being wiped out, or we're going to have the emergence of actual nations committed to economic development. There is no middle ground on this at this point. We are coming to that point of it's going to go one way or another. And the time frame for this is months. So the time frame for this crisis is months. It's not years. It's not even 6 months. It's months. And today I heard a forecaster discussing all of this, whose name is Gerald Salente. And I had a chance to talk to him afterwards. And he pulled his punches somewhat. He didn't want to cause too many people to get too upset. But he said when this situation gets to a certain point, the ruling elite go to war. But now war involves nuclear weapons. But he was very careful not to completely scare people. But I think people should be very scared, and they shouldn't be. If the human race is faced with being wiped out, they shouldn't have the right to sleep at night. They should do something about it. And so the time frame in all of this is months. So I'm going to go through this with you so you get an idea of why I'm saying the time frame is months and what is really happening that is creating that time frame. And then what is the situation in the U.S., which is not defined yet. The situation in the U.S. is not defined. There's an election taking place, and there are things happening that are totally unpredictable, that no one would have predicted, are now happening in the U.S. elections, which I'm going to go into. Now, I'll start with the economic and strategic crisis first before I go into the pivot of the U.S. elections and how that interacts with the strategic crisis. From there, the prospects for a different policy. Now, I'll start with Europe. Europe has now come under, officially, a supranational banker's dictatorship. The nations of Europe no longer exist as nations. They have surrendered their power, financial power, to a central bank under the European Stability Mechanism. That is now real. The countries of Europe are now no longer countries. They no longer have individually sovereignty. They may have a language, they may have other features, but they're not nations anymore. They've lost their nationhood. And this has all happened in the last month. Now, this means that inflation and austerity and inflation will be engulfing Europe. And the so-called former nations of Europe. And their people did not have a say, direct say, in any of this. And their patience to suffer this new government that is now going to be running them from Brussels, not from their former capitals, they are not going to find this arrangement something that they can suffer. And there will be revolts. And those revolts will be crushed with brutal military police force, as you're beginning to see the inklings of in Spain. Because the orders to do so no longer have to come from the people of Spain or the people of Italy or the people of Greece. The orders are coming from Brussels. Enforce the austerity. Now, even though in Greece, the opposition party is calling the situation for what it is. And they are saying that the whole thing is a terror blackmail. That if you do not accept the austerity, right, and do not surrender your sovereignty, all hell's going to break out financially. But it's going to break out anyhow in the form of brutal austerity and social unrest. Now, even though you have in Italy the former finance minister Tremonti creating a new party to run on the basis of breaking Italy out of the European Union and establishing Glass-Steagall and creating a party against the speculators. And even though you have rearguard constitutional resistance in Germany, which is largely shaped by people associated with Helga, LaRouche, and others, the situation is that there will be an unavoidable clash between the dictatorship that is now being imposed on Europe and the population, which is now exists, by the way. This is a dictatorship. And you will have a clash between the population and the still existing national identity of each European population. Each still has a national identity, which is not European per se, which is a national identity. They have the vestiges of a national identity, and that and their unwillingness to accept the austerity is going to feed into a social unrest. Now, it's in this context of the consolidation of this European dictatorship that the European Union just received the blessings of being rewarded the Nobel Peace Prize. You all heard about that, right? So what this now means from the financial aspect of this aspect is that the super bailouts of the bankers, of the European banks at the center of the global empire can now proceed without opposition. And what that also means is that the bailout will begin a process of inflation which will trigger further internal unrest and further inflation. And that unrest will be dealt with, as I said, so brutally. Now, the role of the U.S. presidency in this European situation under Barack Obama has been a major support and promoter of establishing a European dictatorship. And this U.S. involvement in the establishment of a European dictatorship cannot be underestimated because the United States has the military forces and has the power in NATO. And Obama and his administration played an absolutely crucial role in forcing the resistance that existed to the European dictatorship, forcing them to surrender. Now, this is all occurring simultaneously with the quantitative easing of the Federal Reserve. Now, how long can this process occur without causing the ungovernability and the hyperinflation and the ungovernability? Where is the boundary condition for this? Because there is a boundary condition. You cannot do this without causing the disintegration of the body politic at the same time as causing the collapse of the people's purchasing power and the collapse of the currencies. So how long, and so you have also currency wars developing. Now, how long can this process occur? Now, the boundary condition on hyperinflation and the social unrest defines the time frame for the oligarchy to impose this dictatorship that they've just imposed on Europe in a global way. And of course, they plan to use the crisis created by the collapse of the financial system to impose this. So, now, they have a problem in that Russia and China are not going to go along. They're not going to go along. And the weapons that are being applied and are in the process of being applied to force compliance on a global scale is one, terrorism, mass unrest and terrorism is targeting Russia, is targeting China, is targeting India. That's the potential there. And the primary form of this terrorism is the Islamic religious terrorism created by the Saudis, and it's not really religious. It's a terror machine that you saw being built up that was involved in 9/11 and was involved in the current 9/11, which occurred in Libya, which is occurring all over the world. Now, so that's one aspect of it. The other aspect of forcing compliance is the threat of nuclear war. And how does that work? Well, the Russia is being ringed by BMD systems, which can be used offensively, and China is now being ringed by the same BMD systems that can be used offensively. And the idea is, if you are not willing to comply to a new order, then you face the consequences of war, and consequences of war is annihilation. Wouldn't you want to be part of a world order, then be annihilated? And that's the perspective that's being promoted. And then offers are being made to the Chinese that we'll have a new system, you'll be part of the new system when the system collapses, and all this kind of stuff is going on, all this kind of games are playing on. And of course, the places with the largest raw material reserves, like Canada, or Russia, Siberia, or other places of that nature, of course, play a very key role because these are the locations for the future resources that China would have available. So now that's the orientation. Now, it does not appear at this point that under any circumstances will the Russians or the Chinese go along with this system. So that means nuclear war. Now, nuclear war means not just the devastation that nuclear war causes and the nuclear winter, but it creates a question mark for the survival of the oligarchy. But it also plays back into the situation inside the United States. Because all of this requires that you have control and direction over the U.S. nuclear arsenal. And there is growing opposition to this faction of the world establishment, centered around the British monarchy and centered around the Saudi monarchy and centered around Obama, for the U.S. nuclear arsenal to be at their behest, at their command. So you have a situation in which the nuclear arsenal of the United States is an aspect of the battle over determining how this situation will return. And all of this requires that in this context, the oligarchy does not lose control over that nuclear arsenal, which means essentially losing control over the U.S. So the time frame is not long. It's very short. And probably by the end of this year. Probably by the at the end of 2012. Now, nuclear war is the reality of the outcome of this oligarchical desire to use the financial collapse, which same system of collapse is the engine for imposing the empire on the world in destroying their enemy, which is nations. The enemy of the oligarchy is the existence of nations. The financial collapse is being used to destroy nations. They are using the financial collapse inherent in their system to collapse nations and create the empire. Now, the failure of achieving their objectives through the collapse means that they collapse. Notice that they fail to have a nuclear war, or they fail to wipe out nations altogether through the collapse of the system and through the unrest that causes. Only a sovereign nation or a cluster of sovereign nations that survive, any sovereign nations or clusters of sovereign nations that survive will write the new rules for themselves, based on their conception of their national sovereign self-interest of the common welfare of the nation state and its citizens. So in other words, who is left standing in this crisis? Battered but still functioning nations, or no nations? That's what you're dealing with. That's the reality. And we are witnessing the war between the empire and the sovereign nation state, which is coming to a head now, in this period. And two such nations which have the potential of survival are Russia and the Chinese, because they have a leadership that has some sense of reality. Another potential nation that has the potential to survive is India. And the other nation that has some potential of survival, if it goes through a change, is the United States. So nuclear war is the last option of the imperial oligarchy. While they may risk the annihilation of the human race, that is preferable to being defeated by the principle of a sovereign nation state. That is what they have to do if they want to eliminate the sovereign nation state. But they're also running the risk of eliminating themselves in the process. So the survivability of the sovereign nation state rests on three things. The future survivability rests on three things, which you know about. One is the credit system. In this case, it would be Glass-Steagall. Glass-Steagall would be the regulation and the credit system, and then the infrastructure projects. Those three things are universal. They apply to Russia and China, which already have something equivalent to Glass-Steagall probably in place now. But they apply to Russia, China, or any country. But you don't have countries anymore. You have essentially, countries are being wiped out. Syria is a country that's about to get wiped out. Libya is a country that was wiped out. Iran's another country that's about to get wiped out. And there are other countries that are about to get wiped out. And all the European nations are no longer our nations. They gave it up in the last month. In the last month, they gave up their sovereignty. Now, you see a discussion on this going on at a conference that occurs every year in Rhodes, which is an island off of Greece. And that's a conference of the World Forum on the Dialogue of Civilizations. And one of the founders of this conference, who goes there every year, is Vladimir Yakunin, the head of the Railway Ministry of Russia, and was formerly the boss of Putin when the Soviet Union was functioning, or semi-functioning. And he's very close to Putin. And the Rio Novosti, which is a major publication in Russia, covered Helga LaRouche's short presentation in the last panel at the end, where she laid some of this out. And this was, and then they had an interview with Yakunin in Der Spiegel. And basically, he's saying that this is headed towards war. Now we come to the situation in the U.S. election. Now, to most Canadians, I would anticipate that the U.S. elections is like a horror show, or some kind of, as Gerald Salente called, reality TV show, or one of those things. And now, that may be the appearance of it, but you have two processes going on. You have the clown show, or the political parties and their issues, and then you have reality, which is reflected in the military or the intelligence community or policy people or other forces that are now realizing and have been realizing that this is not going to work. So now you have Obama. Now you have to understand that the re-election of Obama is the paramount issue for the global oligarchy. His re-election is their number one item on their agenda. Because in the presidential system, an incoming president has to put an entire new administration together from all the various forces that are in touch with that incoming administration. It's not like a parliament. In 1980, when Reagan won the election, LaRouche was brought in as part of an array of forces to discuss what the policy of the government should be. And out of that came the SDI. The same thing here. You have an opening in the months prior to the election where forces are coalescing around the candidates, and after the election you have that process. So that it's not in this crisis. If you do not have Obama as president, in this crisis you don't have control over the United States. Nobody really has control over the United States in that period going into the inauguration and the period immediately following the inauguration. Because nothing's been consolidated, the officials haven't been appointed. It's a process of molting that occurs like a shell creature molting, where they go out of the shell and a new shell has to grow. It's that kind of process, and you don't have command of the United States as you do under Obama. Okay, if Obama was reelected. Okay, now, so Obama's losing the election to Romney opens the door, but doesn't solve any problems. There is a deep British Freemasonic connection to the leading circles of the Mormon Church, which could have some influence on Romney. But that's another channel for the same policies that Obama represents. But we are very aware that that's a channel for the same policies that Obama represents through the British Crown, through British Freemasonry, into the leadership of the highest ranking leadership within the Mormon Church, which could have an influence on Romney. But there are many other forces besides that that are at play. And there's evidence that Romney is now starting to bring those other forces in, and that they are advising him in terms of his handling of the debates. Now, here's the way this thing works. Obama is not loved by his people who are going to vote for him, or the political apparatus that is mobilizing now to support him, including Bill Clinton. None of these forces really like Obama. He doesn't have their support in reality. So he has to keep them in the fold. And what he's done to keep them in the fold is that the media and prior Republican candidates have created the impression, or should I say perception, managed perception, that the Republicans are wingnuts, or they're out to kill the poor, or they're just religious nutcases, or whatever. So you don't want to vote for someone like that. Well, you have to vote for Obama. Well, he's trying, but they blocked him. So a lot of people who would normally vote for the party, the Democratic Party, are being told they have to vote for the Democratic Party because the Republican Party is so bad and blah, blah, blah. So you have that whole situation. Then you have Obama saying that he kept keeping you safe from terrorism, he killed Osama bin Laden, he's using the drones and all of that. So there's that whole approach, saying, Obama is the guy, who's defending the nation, he's tough, all of that. And that plays to a certain mindset in the U.S. population. So those are the levers that are being used. Now, what happened in the debate, the first debate on October 3rd, is that Obama did not have control, and his handlers did not have control of that debate. He did not have an adulating environment. He did not have handlers controlling the questions that he would be asked, or the responses that his opponent would have. So therefore, Obama was not in a position to deal with even a Romney, because Obama is hardwired. He's not really a flexible person who can extemporaneously and fluidly deal with shifting questions and so forth and so on. So he was caught naked, in a sense, without all the props, and it didn't look very good. Okay, now to a Canadian audience it might have looked passable, but to an American audience it did not look very good. And he walked out of the debate thinking he won the debate. And it took 2 days to explain to him that he lost the debate. And then he admitted he lost the debate. Now, what that did was change the whole perception that the perception that had been created was that Obama was a shoo-in. That the Republicans were gonna go down like they did the last time. But that perception in the population changed. And as soon as that happened, Lyndon LaRouche decided to do a webcast every Friday until the elections, which he has 2 more to go. And these are designed to help create the discussions, to help shape the policies of the next administration, the next non-Obama administration. And that's what's going on. Now, the other aspect of losing Obama as president is it will free the Democrats, the progressive Democrats, the Kucinich Democrats, and the other Democrats who have been on the forefront of defending the general welfare and are against the austerity, against the budget cuts, and against the war, and against terror, against the wars. They will be freed. They will not be so imprisoned by the party game between Republicans and Democrats. They will be free, and they will be a real problem for any Romney moving to cut to impose austerity or go to war. They'll be a real problem. They'll be more of a problem for Romney than they are currently for Obama. They are not doing anything to stop Obama. But being that Romney's from a different party, they will mobilize to stop Romney on all those things that they refuse to mobilize to stop Obama on. So that's a very critical aspect of what could happen. Now, so the perception game that was created by the oligarchy to bring in Obama as a re-election. And everybody thought the Romney thing was dead in the water. And then it changed. That was unpredictable. Now, another factor in this, which is very important, is what happened in Libya 2 weeks before, 9/11. 3 weeks before, 9/11. What happened in Libya? As soon as it happened, within 24 hours, the LaRouche movement put the fact sheet together and got it to all the congressmen, got it to everybody. And what happened with this ambassador being killed is that it showed that the intelligence community was warning, the State Department was warning, the Obama administration cut the security. And the result was what you saw. And then the Obama administration went out and lied after the State Department did a briefing that it was a terrorist attack. Went out and lied and said it wasn't. And so the whole thing has undermined Obama's projection of power as the guy who can handle terrorism. But that doesn't solve our problem. That just undermines him. Now we are putting out a report called Obama's War on America. This is 9/11/2. This report, which is selling now for $100, is a report that links what happened in Libya with the 9/11/1, the Saudis, and the British. And we've been getting this into the hands of the intelligence community. We got it to all of the staffers at the congressional hearing on what happened in Libya last Wednesday. And this is having reverberations. Now, so if it looks like Obama might be defeated, and there's no guarantee that Obama will be the next, continue on as president, then this accelerates the war drive. Because if Obama is going to go, they might as well go for it now and not wait till after he's elected. So that whole process is going on. Now, we know that the Obama administration was involved in getting Turkey to cause a Russian civilian aircraft to be forced to land on Turkish soil, and then inspected and searched, and they found radar components for Turkey's radar system, which were legitimately purchased. This is part of a long-term trade between Russia and Turkey. Russia and Syria. And then they made a big deal about they confiscated, this radar system. Now Putin responded by delaying his trip to Turkey, and then it got very serious. It's getting very serious because what Turkey is a member of NATO. And now you have Europe under a dictatorship. You have NATO getting ready to get Turkey into Syria, and Russia's ready to come in. And this is all happening now. And the key political military figures in Turkey are saying their tanks can reach Damascus in hours. They're saying that publicly. We can go in and take out Syria. Now, you do not send Turkish tanks into Syria without causing a Russian response. Then you have the Israeli situation. And there was an article in Foreign Affairs where a guy said, well, Obama is going to go in, the U.S. and Israel are going to do a surgical destruction of their so-called nuclear facilities, and then that'll be it. It'll be over, and it'll help Obama win the election. That's in Foreign Affairs magazine. So that's the kind of situation that you're in. Now, Now, very interestingly, you had a response from both the progressive wing of the Democratic Party and the conservative wing of the Republican Party. One of them is Rand Paul, the son of Ron Paul. He has come out saying he will back Romney in the election, but Romney has to change his stance on supporting military actions against Syria because that's not what the United States needs to be going around overthrowing governments. And two, we don't know who we're dealing with. And in Afghanistan, the people that the U.S. forces are training are now shooting, killing American and NATO soldiers. So he's saying, you know, that Romney has to change that position where he's saying, I'm tough too, you know. And the second thing is that Kucinich came out saying that when you overthrow governments illegally, this is what you get. You're going to get more of this. And so these two individuals representing different perspectives, but nonetheless have surfaced in a way that reverberates in a number of different ways. Now, so we have these webcasts. We're preparing for a new government. Republicans. A Republican administration. What is the problem with a Republican administration? Stupidity. The difference between someone like Obama, who is really evil and has no compass. The Republicans are stupid. And I'll go into what I mean by that. And so you got people coming in who will go for the austerity and not the Glass-Steagall. Who will go for who will create an ungovernable situation. Maybe they don't intend to go to nuclear war like Obama might, but they don't get it. And it's ideological. It's a profound ideological problem. And what is the ideological problem? They tend to view the society that they live in as a summation of individual activities. Well, you know, well, I balance my checkbook in my home. Why can't government do the same thing? Why do they spend more than what they get? If everybody were to, it's a question of individual morality, and then a free market, which allows the individual the freedom to go for their best interests. And so their idea of an economy is not an economy. It's an idea of a system of individuals being allowed to have competition to develop and not being restrained in their activities. So they look at an economy as some kind of additive system of individuals, where this individual and that individual and that individual, and then you got the individuals who don't really give it whatever, and they don't want to work, and they're the problem, and they're dragging everybody down. It's a mindset. It's an actual system of thinking, which does not understand that that's not an economy. Now, people who are in the government, and people who are in the state government, and people who have to deal with the real world, they do know about infrastructure. They do know about energy flux density. They do know that you're going to have to do this and this and this, and the private sector can't do it. We need a private sector, but the private sector isn't going to do it. They know these things. Not because they have an ideological thing, but because they're involved in the reality of the world. But you have all these people pushing. Now, you have a lot of people who know the reality of the world, but then when they speak as politicians, they're not going to tell you that, because they're going to lose the ideological support of the people, of the simple-minded, stupid people that believe that stuff. So that's what the problem is we're going to have. Now, if the election is over, then you have to end the politics, because of the partisan politics on this crass, stupid level. You have to go for policies, discussion. So the whole thing that we're trying to do is shift the post-election period into a policy. And this is going to be our last chance, because we don't have time. It's coming to an end. And shifting the U.S. political situation in terms of the policies, not parties, policies. So you have a vast number of people who are just totally do not like any of this. Republican or Democrat or Romney or Obama or any of that. They don't want any of it. And I don't blame them. But we have to create a government that's going to function as a nation, for a nation of the United States that's going to act from the standpoint of the nation, national interest, and that will remove the threat of nuclear war. And then the other big major nations can collaborate with the United States on the future development of the world. But without that, we will not have a possibility of success. And it's not going to be the stupid Republicans who are going to do this on their own. It's going to be the policy discussion that is now occurring and will accelerate into the period of transition between the election and the inauguration. And then you got to box this nutcase in, whatever you need to do with Obama. Now, I don't know what the future debates are going to be like. I don't know what the remaining, whether there's going to be an October surprise in the war and all of that, which is very likely. But that's the reality of the situation. So we have to create a government based on a policy that is not the current Republican, the stated current mantra of Republican austerity, that you got to cut the budgets, right? And so we see an opportunity for that, but that's going to be the fight. And this is going to be determining the future of the relations between Russia and the United States, the future of the survival, whether nations will have a survival in the collapse and actually get to act as nations in creating a different system. And that's really what is going on. And that's our battle. That's the battle of the LaRouche movement. And so this is what our job is. And someone asked me, someone asked Gerald Salente today in an interview that he was doing for the Agora, what about Canada? And, he said that Canada would be the last to go because it had raw material, it was a raw material resource base, but that it would go with everything else. And that Canada, as part of NATO, is actually playing a role in the global war game, in the global projection of war, which is why this whole Iran thing and Kissinger giving Harper the medal, and of course the European Union got the Nobel Peace Prize. Now that they're a dictatorship, you know, they get the Nobel Peace Prize. So I'm going to stop there and open it up. Europe has now come under, officially, a supranational banker's dictatorship. The nations of Europe no longer exist as nations. They have surrendered their power, financial power, to a central bank under the European Stability Mechanism. That is now real. The countries of Europe are now no longer countries. They no longer have individually sovereignty. They may have a language, they may have other features, but they're not nations anymore. They've lost their nationhood. And this has all happened in the last month. Now, this means that inflation and austerity and inflation will be engulfing Europe. And the so-called former nations of Europe. And their people did not have a say, direct say, in any of this. And their patience to suffer this new government that is now going to be running them from Brussels, not from their former capitals. They are not going to go to war. But now war involves nuclear weapons. But he was very careful not to completely scare people. But I think people should be very scared, and they shouldn't be. If the human race is faced with being wiped out, they shouldn't have the right to sleep at night. They should do something about it. And so the time frame in all of this is months. So I'm going to go through this with you so you get an idea of why I'm saying the time frame is months and what is really happening that is creating that time frame. And then what is the situation in the U.S., which is not defined yet. The situation in the U.S. is not defined. There's an election taking place, and there are things happening that are totally unpredictable, that no one would have predicted, are now happening in the U.S. elections, which I'm going to go into. Now, I'll start with the economic and strategic crisis first before I go into the pivot of the U.S. elections and how that interacts with the strategic crisis. From there, the prospects for a different policy. Now, I'll start with Europe. All right, we are here in Vancouver with another meeting of the LaRouche movement and the Committee for the Republic of Canada. And our next meeting will be in 2 weeks, which will be October 27th. And you can email me at Paul, P-A-U-L, Glumaz, G-L-U-M-A-Z, @gmail.com if you want to get the address. All right, now here's the situation. We are at an incredible conjuncture of the strategic situation, the economic situation, and the internal political situation in the U.S. These situations are bringing the world ever more closer to a defining moment of nuclear war that obliterates mankind, or a global shift towards a different pathway where the ruling oligarchy over the planet is crushed and a concert of nations begin their process of creating a course of economic development and cooperation for the world. So in other words, we're at the point, coming to this conjuncture, where we're either going to have a nuclear war and humanity being wiped out, or we're going to have the emergence of actual nations committed to economic development. There is no middle ground on this at this point. We are coming to that point of it's going to go one way or another. And the time frame for this is months. So the time frame for this crisis is months. It's not years. It's not even 6 months. It's months. And today I heard a forecaster discussing all of this, whose name is Gerald Salente. And I had a chance to talk to him afterwards. And he pulled his punches somewhat. He didn't want to cause too many people to get too upset. But he said when this situation gets to a certain point, the ruling elite find this arrangement something that they can suffer. And there will be revolts. And those revolts will be crushed with brutal military police force, as you're beginning to see the inklings of in Spain. Because the orders to do so no longer have to come from the people of Spain or the people of Italy or the people of Greece. The orders are coming from Brussels. Enforce the austerity. Now, even though in Greece, the opposition party is calling the situation for what it is. And they are saying that the whole thing is a terror blackmail. That if you do not accept the austerity, right, and do not surrender your sovereignty, all hell's going to break out financially. But it's going to break out anyhow in the form of brutal austerity and social unrest. Now, even though you have in Italy the former finance minister Tremonti creating a new party to run on the basis of breaking Italy out of the European Union and establishing Glass-Steagall and creating a party against the speculators, and even though you have rearguard constitution